Good afternoon, everyone. My name is George Burton, and my talk today is going to address the topic of diversity and climate resilience of Fonio, based on work I took in Guinea last year. I'm a final year PhD student based in the UK at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew and Imperial College London. The research I've conducted looks at Fonio in three main areas: how diversity of land races within small-scale agricultural systems can be beneficial, which growth traits are desirable to producers and how they translate from field to lab-based trials, and looking forward to the future, how can genetic studies be sustainably reconciled with on-the-ground cultivation needs? My study system for this project is the Fouta-Jolon Highlands region of Middle Guinea. This is an incredibly important area for Fonio production for several reasons. Culturally, there is great social importance attached to Fonio, and it's part of a wider national identity. Economically, Guinea is one of the highest producers of Fonio across West Africa, and genetically, land races in Guinea have shown presence of rare genes and very diverse populations. An important part of the project is the spirit of communication. We've been incredibly grateful to work with the Herbier National de Guinea in Conakry, a botanical institute which facilitates the research and education of plant diversity across the country, and the NGO Guinea Ecology, which advocates for sustainable management of ecological resources. At Kew, I'm very lucky to be partnered with Philip Ryan and Benedetta Gori, who use ethnobotanical methods to record and explore the historical stories and traditions associated with agriculture. This human-centric or producer-first approach really helped to shape our interviews and how we worked with farmers to think about Fonio. Together, we spent 5 weeks in the Fouta region, working with producers to answer a selection of questions about which varieties of Fonio farmers grew, the beneficial traits that they had, like high yield or lower shattering, any issues, and any changes to Fonio cultivation in living memory over the past 40 to 50 years. We also found information about the crops surrounding Fonio in these systems, like African or Asian rice, maize, potato, and other vegetables. In the field, we were able to observe and record trait data for different varieties, make herbarium specimen collections, and also collect germplasm or seed for future analysis. As part of the fieldwork, we travelled from the south down in Mamu through to Labe in the north, and to the much more remote area of Mali. This trail is showed by the pink line on the map, representing over 300 kilometers travelled. We visited and interviewed over 120 participants involved with cultivating Fonio from over 15 communities and recorded information for 24 named varieties. We now have a rich dataset of Fonio traits and experiences from farmers, and herbarium and seed collections to undertake important herbarium and lab-based study on the taxonomy, morphology, and genetics of these land races. The most popular varieties were found to be Rane, Bode, Hocha, and Konzo. These varieties were praised for having much higher and more reliable yield due to having more racemes, which are the inflorescence fingers, the part of the plant that the grains sit on, though also having a longer growth period of around 5 to 6 months. The more racemes obviously allows for more grains and higher yield, but the preference for a longer growth period is a bit more complicated and comes down to two main factors. The first is the availability of labour, so the farmers have a bigger window at the end of a long growing season to harvest and dry out the seeds. Fonio is a lot more labour intensive in processing than other cereals, so it's easier to plan more time for this processing if it takes a bit longer to grow over a wider season. With the introduction of schools and more restrictions on education in the region from 30 to 40 years ago, younger members of the community are less available to help in the fields with short growth varieties which need more work earlier on in the season. The second factor is climate, so more erratic and heavier rains now happen mid to late season, and this affects both the plants, which may not be very well established yet for the short growth varieties, and then how and when farmers can harvest, process, and dry the grains during storms. This has meant that some varieties previously very popular, such as barley or liti, were found to be in steep decline, quite rare, or disappeared entirely from certain areas. However, this is a pattern that more heavily affects the southern region of Mamu, which is lowland, has more clay soils which can become waterlogged, and has more precipitation. In the north, we can see that Fonio is more highly prioritised and grown, and that there is more diversity of Fonio landraces. This process has been accelerated by a shifting climate over the past 50 years that was recounted by farmers, and will likely continue into the future, as varieties like Rani, Konzo, or Hocha are actively selected for these beneficial and more resilient traits. An unexpected result from our trip was the absence of a rare secondary millet, Guinea millet, also called coolie. This is a different genus, Brachiaria, which has a very different shape and growth style to Fonio. Previous studies in the area have found this crop to be endemic only to the northern area of the Futa, in a more remote region surrounding the town of Mali. As part of interviews, we showed members of the community photos of this plant, and some recognise it as this exact species. It was only recognised in the north, and all who recognised it said it was no longer cultivated in their area, saying that they preferred the taste of Fonio, that it was more difficult to prepare and to digest. As we didn't encounter any Guinea millet or farmers who currently grow it, it's likely that this species has now disappeared entirely from cultivation, becoming a lost or forgotten crop. If you're interested in learning more about our work in Guinea, our paper should be available soon as part of a special issue with the journal Plants, People, Planet. The next step of this project has been to test these varieties in vitro growth experiments. This has been conducted at the Millennium Seed Bank, UK, with additional collections from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Togo donated by CIRAD and the IRD in France, and their network of in-country partners. The trials involved germinating tens of thousands of seeds under different temperatures and water conditions to test responses and growth thresholds. As expected, Fonio grown at around 30 to 35 degrees is a lot healthier, stronger, and more successful than those at either 20 or 40. An absolute growth limit is reached just before 45 degrees. The farmer-preferred varieties, like Rani, Konzo, or Hocha, were generally a lot more resilient and successful at high temperatures and in these drought conditions. We've also extracted these seedlings for RNA, and through NGS sequencing and analysis, in the top right we can see a strong differential gene expression between those grown at 30 and 40 degrees. We hope that this will allow us more clearly pinpoint gene targets associated with climatic stress for development in the future. In order to look at improving genetics of the group, it is important to improve our knowledge of closely related species, which have useful traits and some are used as forages. At Kew, we have DNA sequenced over 60 different species across the genus, using whole genome and target capture methods to build phylogenetic trees and networks. Herbarium-based study on the taxonomy and morphology of the different Digitaria species is also vital to use as a foundation for sampling. This work will tell us about the history and past domestications of both black and white Fonio and other domesticated Digitaria species such as the Indian relative Raishan or Polish millet in Europe. A recent partnership between the Kew project ADCRA and UK Agricultural Institute NIAB will look into the future and has been carrying out trials for Fonio tissue culturing for gene transformation, looking to target farmer-desired traits like larger grains, more racemes, and lower shattering. The popular varieties like Rani that have been actively selected by farmers already may only need very minor improvement or neo-domestication to become a more competitive and resilient crop. I'd like to end by thanking so many people who have contributed to this project, all listed here. To my supervisors Bat Vorontsova, Tiziana Ulian and Colin Turnbull, and to Paolo Ketchi for being great advisors, to our partners in Guinea for allowing me to work in country and for looking after us in the field, and to our new and future collaborators in Nigeria and Ghana. Thank you to Benedetta Gori, who's also an excellent researcher, friend, and photographer who took most of the photos in this presentation. And also thank you to the International Year of the Millets 23 committee team for making this happen. And to everyone else, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me with the links to the slide, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar and look forward to your discussions.